Hi everyone, I'm Qifei Fan. If a conflict breaks out in the Taiwan Strait, is Taiwan the only one that will suffer? Let's see what President Marcos of the Philippines has to say.
Kaohsiung in Taiwan is a 40-minute flight away from my province. We feel that we're very much on the front line.
That's right. Marcos believes that if a conflict breaks out in the Taiwan Strait, the Philippines will inevitably be drawn in. Today on Operation 2027, we will take a look at the clashes between China and the Philippines in the South China Sea and how a crisis in the Taiwan Strait might impact the Philippines. On May 15, 2024, Filipino fishermen gathered about 100 small boats and sailed toward Scarborough Shoal west of Luzon Island. Wow, are they doing a boat race? Nope. They were there to defend their sovereignty. And who are they asserting their sovereignty against? Yep, it was China. To face off with the Filipino fishermen, China dispatched 19 ships, including Coast Guard vessels, militia boats, and even a warship. I know, it's like a bunch of ants trying to take down an elephant. So, how angry were these Filipino fishermen that they had to do something like this? Let's look at the map. This is a so-called 10-dash line. China uses to claim sovereignty all over the important islands and reefs in the South China Sea. China is all the way here. This is reaching pretty far, don't you think? Almost all the neighboring countries protested. In 2016, the Philippines filed a case against China with the Permanent Court of Arbitration in The Hague. They won the case. Did this help the Philippines? Not at all. China simply ignored the ruling and continued its questionable activities in the South China Sea. In 2021, China passed a new Coast Guard law, authorizing the Chinese Coast Guard to conduct more aggressive enforcement actions in the South China Sea. This included the use of force to expel foreign vessels. After that, the Chinese Coast Guard ramped up its activities in the South China Sea. When they encountered Philippine fishing or supply boats, they would fire water cannons at them, spraying them aggressively until they left the area. The Philippines were furious, of course, but then President Duterte's pro-China stance meant they could only protest verbally, essentially having to swallow their anger. However, since President Marcos took office in 2022, the Philippines have toughened their approach to China. This year, when the Philippines Coast Guard sent ships to resupply the second Thomas Shoal, they were confronted by the Chinese Coast Guard. The Chinese ships surrounded them, sprayed them with water cannons, and even collided with them. This resulted in a standoff at sea that lasted a full 9 hours before it ended. In mid-June, the conflict escalated further. While on a resupply mission, 2 inflatable boats from the Philippine Navy were surrounded and rammed by 8 Chinese Coast Guard vessels. The Chinese forces then boarded the Philippine boats, got into a fight with the crew, injured some of them, and seized their equipment. These incidents were becoming more frequent and are damaging the livelihoods of Filipino fishermen. The fishing industry in the Philippines employs 1.6 million people and contributed 1.3% to the country's GDP in 2022. Given that the South China Sea is a vital fishing ground for Filipino fishermen, harassment by the Chinese Coast Guard poses serious economic harms, not to mention a threat to national security. In terms of geopolitical strategy, if China controls the South China Sea, it can effectively block the U.S. military from reaching Southeast Asia. This weakens the containment capability of the first island chain. The U.S. military primarily used 2 routes to enter and exit the South China Sea from Guam: the Bashi Channel between Taiwan and Luzon Island of the Philippines, or a route directly through the Philippines. The Philippines is made up of many islands with waterways in between that links the Philippine Sea and the South China Sea. The U.S. military uses these waterways to freely access the South China Sea. It can then pass through this Strait of Malacca to reach the Indian Ocean, connecting its military forces in the entire Indo-Pacific region. If China wants to undermine U.S. military movements, it must find a way to block these two routes. For the first route, China frequently sends warplanes and ships into the southwestern waters of Taiwan to practice blockading the Bashi Channel. For the second route, China's goal is to establish military strongholds on the western side of the Philippines that can stop the U.S. military from passing through the Philippines waterways. This is why China and the Philippines clashes over Scarborough Shoal and Second Thomas Shoal. These reefs are located at the entry and exit points of these waterways. If China takes control of these reefs and installs missiles there, it can effectively block the U.S. military from passing through. The Philippines is now facing an unprecedented crisis with China. Historically, the Philippines has managed to avoid major disputes, being geographically distant from both China and Vietnam. In addition, the 1951 Mutual Defense Treaty with the United States stationed the U.S. troops in the country, who basically became their bodyguards, shielding the Philippines from harm despite its frontline position in the Cold War. This is why, until recent years, the Philippines' military primary focus was suppressing domestic anti-government forces. Now, things are different. Now the Philippines is facing an external threat from China. China's Coast Guard and PLA Navy have more than 520 vessels, including aircraft carriers, destroyers, frigates, and submarines. China have deployed over 160 large ships in the South China Sea alone. On the other hand, the Philippine Navy and Coast Guard have about 280 ships, but only 2 of them, 1 frigate and 1 patrol vessel, exceed 1,000 tons. The majority are smaller boats, so they cannot match China's maritime power. The PLA Air Force has over 3,150 aircrafts, whereas the Philippine Air Force has only 26 fighter jets. So they are also outnumbered in the air. What can the Philippines do? Get stronger! Last May, the Philippines ordered the 6 new offshore patrol vessels from South Korea. And at the beginning of this year, the country launched the 3rd phase of its military modernization with an expected investment of $35.62 billion US. This money will be used to enhance intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance capabilities and maritime and aerial deterrence in the South China Sea. They also say that acquiring submarines is a must. The Philippines is building up its arsenal while at the same time seeking to make more friends. Of course, the most important friend is their big bro, the United States. Although former President Duterte chose to distance himself from the U.S. and cozy up to China, current President Marcos immediately turned to the U.S. for cooperation upon taking office. Through the Enhanced Defense Cooperation Agreement signed by the U.S. and the Philippines in 2014, the Philippines not only opened up its existing 5 military bases, but also added 4 more for American use. Big Bro's response was also quite enthusiastic, providing $660 million to help the Philippines repair airports and build runways. Because they will make it easier for the U.S. to park its planes there, train the Philippine Air Force there. Why is the U.S. so enthusiastic about supporting the Philippines? Because it directly impacts U.S. interests. If China gains control of the South China Sea, it would allow the PLA Navy to freely maneuver into the Philippine Sea. If China controls the Bashi Channel up north, they could traverse the Miyako Strait to directly threaten areas like Guam and the Mariana Islands, which are part of the second island chain defense line. China conducted military exercise in the Philippine Sea in both April and September of last year, mobilizing its newest aircraft carrier group led by the Shandong. Therefore, we can see how U.S. investments in the Cesar Basa Air Base and Antonio Batista Air Base are precisely aimed at monitoring the Bashi Channel and the South China Sea. In addition to the U.S., the Philippines has also been sending friend requests to Japan and Australia, both located in the first island chain. The Philippines has purchased 4 sets of air defense radars from Japan, and the two countries have discussed the possibility of stationing troops in each other's territories. And in April of this year, the Philippines invited Australia to participate in the largest ever joint military exercise with the United States. Together, they demonstrated the resolve of island chain countries to counter China's expansion. By the way, these exercises were held in the Batanes Islands. Why here? Because it is the closest point to Taiwan. Still, the Philippine military stated that this joint military exercise was not directed at Taiwan, but I think it's obvious that the Chinese threat to Taiwan is something that the Philippines cannot ignore. Let's look at why.
那这次他借着美菲这个联合的演习，那么他又选到的地方是靠近台湾的地方，他给出一种信号说，万一有些冲突的话，美菲是联盟，那么菲律宾靠近台湾的这边的这些基地，它是有用处的，这也是一种嚇阻的信号啦。
Firstly, there are over 150,000 Filipino nationals working in Taiwan. If China were to attack Taiwan, the Philippine government would face the extremely challenging task of evacuating its citizens. President Marcos himself has stated that allowing the U.S. military to use their bases is partially aimed at facilitating the rescue of Filipino nationals from Taiwan in the event of a Chinese invasion. Secondly, Taiwan has always been a crucial buffer state between the global superpowers of China and the U.S. Due to various reasons, Taiwan has borne the brunt of much of the pressure along the first island chain. If China were to invade Taiwan, the Philippines would become the next buffer state in line. Furthermore, if China wins in the Taiwan Strait, it would embolden its expansion efforts, and their next target would likely to be the South China Sea. China could even install missiles in the southern Taiwan, posing a direct threat to Luzon Island, where the Philippine capital Manila is located. Therefore, maintaining the status quo in the Taiwan Strait is the least risky option for the Philippines. Thirdly, according to the data from the Philippine Statistics Authority, in 2023, goods imported from China accounted for 21.1% of the Philippines' total imports, while goods from Taiwan accounted for 7.7%. This shows that the Philippines maintains a significant trade relationship with both Taiwan and China. A conflict in the Taiwan Strait would have a serious impact on these supply chains, since the Philippines is heavily dependent on imports from China and Taiwan. Electronics, for instance, are the largest category of imported goods for the Philippines, accounting for 22.2% of its total imports, followed by mineral fuels and lubricants, accounting for 18.8%. If a conflict in the Taiwan Strait were to disrupt these supply chains, the Philippines would face shortages of goods, severely affecting its production capabilities. China and Taiwan are also major destinations for Philippine exports, especially in the electronics sector. In 2023, electronics accounted for 54.2% of the Philippines' total exports, with a significant portion going to China and Taiwan. A crisis in the Taiwan Strait would lead to a sharp drop in demand, impacting the Philippine export business and domestic economic growth. No matter how you look at it, a conflict in the Taiwan Strait would be bad for the Philippines. It seems the best approach for the Philippines is to maintain a unified front against China with its allies in the island chain under the assistance of the United States. The more allies stand together, the greater the deterrent against China's ambitions, and the lower the risk of war. But keep in mind, This alliance currently does not include Taiwan due to diplomatic considerations. The Philippine government has not officially recognized Taiwan and cannot engage in military cooperation with it, like it does with the United States and Japan. The Philippine government has also avoided taking a stance on how it would respond in the event of a war in the Taiwan Strait. Finally, I want to come back to what we talked about at the beginning. The troop of tiny ants go against an elephant. A lot of you might assume that Filipino fishermen sailing against China's navy was a waste of time, that they were too weak, that they should not embarrass themselves. But the truth is, these ants were actually quite effective. First, these actions carry strong symbolic meanings. It signaled to the international communities that the Philippines would not easily relinquish its sovereignty. In fact, this incident successfully attracted widespread coverage from both domestic and international media outlets. Second, this movement effectively placed political pressure on both the Philippines government and the international community. The mobilization reflected the fishermen's grassroots concern and their dissatisfaction with the country's passive handling of China's behavior. Third, their movement raised public awareness and support for defending the Philippines territory, inspiring more people to join in an effort to uphold national sovereignty. Fourth, the actions of the Filipino fishermen might potentially lead to more backing from the international community, especially from countries that support freedom of navigation and oppose expansionism. Of course, these actions were not without risks. The Filipino fishermen definitely put themselves in danger when they square off with China's powerful maritime forces, and their high-stakes standoff could have escalated further, amplifying tensions in the South China Sea. What's more, no one knows for sure how the Philippines' hard-nosed strategy toward China will play out in the long run. After the most recent scuffle in the South China Sea, will China face any repercussions from the Philippines and its international allies?
因为菲律宾实在没有这个能力跟中国做军事冲突。如果要军事冲突，一定美国要加入。那美国要加入这个军事冲突，他会考虑的是一个区域的一个整个抗中、整个这个两极世界抗争的，它不是那么容易，就因为一个小小的礁。 就突然就产生军事冲突，我不觉得美国会这么样的不谨慎。
But what I really want to emphasize here is that, yes, China's bullying behavior is a big headache, but that doesn't mean that you should just give in. Hasn't the Philippines tried to be friendlier with China? And what was the result? According to a 2023 survey, 79% of Filipinos consider China the biggest threat to the Philippines and support President Marcos' firm stance against China's provocations. Another survey showed that 67% of Filipinos express almost no trust or no trust at all toward China. It's basically the same as dealing with a schoolyard bully. If we all stick together and stand against the bully as a united front, then the giant bully isn't so scary anymore. But if you choose to take the bullying by yourself over and over without fighting back, well, we will just have to see how much you can take. If you find this video helpful, please leave a comment and let us know your thoughts. If you are in a hurry, you can always give us a like. Most importantly, please help share this video and get the word out there. Finally, if you feel like supporting us, please do. More information can be found in the video description. 2027 is coming. Let's be vigilant together. See you next time. This video is in collaboration with TaiwanPlus.